Welcome to this lesson where we're going to look at different issues involved in creating surveys. We're going to begin by looking at the difference between primary and secondary data. So primary data is data that you create. That includes things like a survey. In contrast, secondary data is data that you find that someone else has created. So it's something like an article online, where the research has all been done and you've been given the information. So both of these have positives and negatives. Primary data you've collected yourself, and therefore you know it's going to meet the question that you're answering. It's going to specifically meet that. Whereas secondary data, you don't know that for sure, or it might not quite meet what you're looking at. You also know how reliable your data is. So assuming that you do take the correct steps, you know that your data is going to be reliable. You can't be sure of that with secondary data. However, with primary data, there is the drawback of it taking more time. You have to do the research yourself, so it's going to take time and it's going to cost more money, which is the benefit. The major benefit of secondary data is that all the work's been done, the information's all there for you to use, so it's free and faster to use. When we're creating a survey, we want to consider a few factors. The first one we're looking at is the sample size. So a bigger sample size equals a more valid or dependable. So bigger means that you're going to have a more dependable survey. Let's say your population was our class. If you were to survey 20 people, you're going to have a better representation of the views of the class than if you were to survey 1 or 2. So the sample size is something that's important to consider. Practicality, though, is something we need to also look at. If you have a bigger sample size, it will take longer and therefore cost more. In our class, it wouldn't be too big a deal if we were to survey the whole class. But if we were, say, making some information about Australia, it would take us a long time to survey the whole population of Australia. And so we'd want a smaller sample for that. We also need to think about bias. So when you're creating a survey, you'll often have an idea that you're trying to get across. We need to be making sure that our questions don't get across that bias in any way. We can do this first by the sample that we choose. Using a random sample is going to help us get rid of that bias. So drawing names out of a hat or using a random name generator, but also selecting a sample to meet the population that you're aiming at. So that could be choosing a certain number of people based on their age, their sex, their nationality, etc. But we also do need to ensure that we are looking at people of different backgrounds and of different interests to make sure that our surveys are not biased and just looking at one group of people. And this is a big issue in secondary data because it's not something that we can check done. We also need to consider what type of data we want. So here I've written quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative data is numbers, whereas qualitative data is data that's more like sentences and ideas. So it's, we'll just write sentences. So in some situations you might want quantitative data. So this is things like on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you like this food? But qualitative is sometimes more helpful as well. It could help you come across ideas that you didn't know already. So that would be things like, what ways could I improve my teaching? Both of these have their place and are very useful, but you need to work out what sort of information you want to get in the end. And that also brings us to numerical and categorical, and we've been looking at that in class. So the questions you write are going to determine what sort of data you collect. Finally, we're going to look at the ethics involved in conducting a survey. So we need to always make sure that our surveys are ethical. And there's a few steps we can do to ensure that. Firstly, we need to make sure that the people doing our survey have given us the permission to collect the data. So we need there to be a statement at the beginning saying, are you okay for me to collect this data? Or there's been a verbal agreement there. So they need to be happy to complete the survey. There needs to also be privacy maintained. So once they've completed the survey, before you publish results, you need to remove any names or anything that could identify the people involved. That way they're going to complete the survey knowing that they can be open and honest and it's not going to come back to them in the end. The survey should also benefit and respect all those people who are involved. So the people being surveyed should benefit out of the survey in the end. This is what we've covered. If you have any questions, please let me know.